My name is Jörn Gander, CTO of BRABUS, and today I'm going to show you this incredible car, the BRABUS Rocket 1000. For years, almost decades, we've been asked again and again by our fans and customers, when will BRABUS finally present a vehicle with 1,000 horsepower? Well, the time has finally come. The BRABUS 1000 reaches this milestone, the magical 1,000 horsepower. And we're super proud to finally be able to present this car as a rocket variant with this kind of performance. If we're going to discuss the technical details of this vehicle, it obviously makes sense with the number 1000 to start with the propulsion system, the V8, the 4.5-liter engine. The standard issue version of this car has a 4-liter engine. We've thoroughly modified the engine's entire crank drive to get from 4 to 4.5 liters, featuring new pistons with larger bores, as well as a new crankshaft with more stroke. We always manufacture these crankshafts from a solid source, which means we start out with a big steel cylinder from which the crankshafts are made through corresponding milling and lathe techniques. This is a process that's usually carried out in the world of motorsports for smaller production series, smaller quantities. And while we're on the topic, here's another special detail. Our counterweights radii are relatively small, meaning the counterweights on the crankshaft corresponding to the connecting rod's position have a very restricted radius, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to fit them into the crankcase provided by Mercedes-Benz, or AMG in this case, so we've installed special tungsten inserts. Tungsten, like lead, is a relatively dense metal, which means you have a relatively large weight at a small base volume. That way, we can create a crankshaft that balances out well thanks to its mass. But as a whole, this particular shaft is a lot lighter than the base vehicles. This gives it a greater turning capacity, and its mass inertia is significantly reduced. In addition, as an element linking the piston and the crankshaft, we have a new connecting rod. There, too, we're dealing with different geometric proportions, and everything has to fit perfectly. So we've made new, slightly shorter connecting rods to compensate for the longer stroke with the piston's compression height. Another detail regarding the crank drive is we've developed special oil injectors. Allow me to quickly get into that topic. Every modern high-performance engine has what we call oil-injected cooling, which means we have valves located just under the pistons to inject oil. This oil cools the pistons from below, and these oil cooling valves also have to be adapted accordingly because the crankcase is standard issue. We have to fit in more stroke, more bore, more components, which of course requires a new package. And all of this happens in a very tight space, which is why this level of detail is unbelievably important to us. The turbochargers have been significantly enlarged on the compressor side, in other words, the compressor side and turbine side, specifically for a higher volume flow, in order to generate the extra performance from this 4.5-liter engine. Besides this, the turbocharger's core assemblies, as well as their bearing units, have been extensively modified as well. A turbo has to bear extreme loads. It does 150,000 to 160,000 RPMs, and it gets incredibly hot, because essentially the entire exhaust flow goes through it. So you can easily have temperatures of up to 1,000 degrees Celsius. And all this together, high revolutions, intense loads, and high temperatures, is incredibly demanding on this component. That's why we've put a lot of work into the details of the core assemblies, optimize the bearing, the oil supply, the axial bearing, for the sake of ending up with a sustainable, stable system. A really important visual element is our carbon fiber cover in red carbon, which is an easy way to recognize the big 4.5-liter engine. The whole thing is rounded off by an electric drive unit at the rear axle, which is why we talk here of a so-called P3 hybrid architecture, which means the electric powertrain is in the back. It's completely separate and independent. It's a system featuring a dedicated electric engine which is directly connected to the rear differential. It has a very sophisticated regulatory system as well as a very thorough battery management system, which we get in that form once again from the base car, in this case the GT63 SE Performance. To sum it up, it's a 1,000 horsepower system, 1,820 Newton meters of torque, These are absolutely remarkable, impressive performance figures. Another really cool thing is how emotional the drive is. So you have this really great-sounding V8 engine combined with the power of the all-electric drivetrain. That means you can have an entirely different driving feel across various different driving modes, which you can also combine and configure individually. So when you want to drive through a town or a city, you drive electric. And as soon as you see the sign that says you're exiting the city, you can switch over again and get that super emotional, strong drive, which in this case is also especially impressive on the highway. It's a technical interplay that's super intricate and really fascinating. The front, in principle, is one we already know from the BRABUS Rocket 900, which we presented toward the end of 2020. Once again, we have the completely new carbon fiber front apron. This means the part really is completely new and made entirely of carbon fiber. Some areas are painted and others are integrated as visual carbon parts. As usual, it's pre-preg carbon, because details like this herringbone pattern with that divided layout, that flush layout of the carbon fibers, plus the corresponding 45-degree alignment, as a brand statement, it's an important detail for us, where we can really show what we're capable of achieving in terms of the manufacturing quality of our carbon fiber components. The customer generally has the possibility to order any visual carbon parts on this vehicle either with a glossy finish, as we see down here, or a matte finish. In the end, that's purely a question of taste and personal preference. I have to say I'm a big fan of glossy components because the luster, the paint thickness, gives off a corresponding effect of depth that makes these carbon fibers incredibly interesting. And this 3D depth effect gives them such a unique feel. Then we have the grille's air vents, also in carbon fiber. These components are amplified by the rocket launch ambient light. So it's a startup animation. When you walk up to the car and unlock it, from the get-go, you directly see the red lighting. That's what you get with the Rocket 1000. On the side, we have a new component as well. Several new components, actually. These carbon fiber aero blades, positioned around the wheel arch radiator's air ducts. That's not just purely a design component. There's actually a functional reason behind them. On various wind tunnel measurements for the vehicle, we established that we still had potential for performance improvements, especially with regard to the wheel arch radiator's airflow, so that we could achieve a greater cooling effect and a better airflow with the radiators. And that's why we created these components. Visually, they're attractively presented in carbon fiber to match the look. There's actually also a historical connection. The first BRABUS rocket, based at the time on the CLS, which set what was then the world record with 366 kilometers per hour at Nardo, also had these components. Back then, they weren't as nice as these, but they had the same technical background and motivation. Now we come to another large carbon fiber component. The entire front fender is also new and made of carbon fiber. And something you realize that can be seen here very clearly is that this car doesn't have the same width as a standard issue GT63. In total, the car is about 60 millimeters wider than the standard GT. You can clearly see that here on the side. This additional vehicle width also obviously requires a special wheel, a design known from the BRABUS Rocket R based on the Porsche 911 Turbo S. The monoblock P design with these multi-part aero rings integrated into the rim. Of course, these aero rings have become very popular and an important design element that helps differentiate certain rim designs from one another. But these components also have a very important technical aspect. A lot of air gets to the wheel arches from the front through the wheel arch radiators. That means the wheel arches have excess pressure on them. And this increased pressure has to be reduced, which usually occurs from the inside out through the rims. This pressure offset needs to be channeled, which we do with these aero blades. That way, we reduce the turbulence that usually builds up right around here by the wheels because of the wheel's rotation and the air that exits from there. And thanks to the lower turbulence in this area, we obtain a better, more laminar flow for the car. This contributes to its overall aerodynamics, reducing the driving resistance in this area and helping the air pass more neatly around and over the car, thereby ultimately reducing the total drag coefficient. We have a 21-inch rim on the front axle and a 22-inch rim on the rear axle. So these are really big, meaty tires. Another interesting thing with the Rocket R, based on the Porsche 911 Turbo S, we integrated the center lock connection for the wheel, which is actually a feature we don't have here. We've got a standard issue 5-hole connection behind this cover, so a typical configuration for 5 bolts. But as a decorative element, we created this center lock look with the cover, which in turn gives it the impression of being a center lock wheel. A small detail that's always very important to me is the wheel arch liner. We always give these cars special Kevlar wheel arches. So the entire wheel arch liner, whether it's made of one or multiple parts, is made of Kevlar, because the wider fenders make it impossible for us to use the standard issue wheel arches. So we like to use this material instead. There's a technical aspect to it. It's 100% motorsport, and it's simply a wonderful detail that once again shows just how much effort we put into these vehicles. Now, we've been talking the whole time about the front axle and its wheels. So let's just talk a bit about the rear axle. We've, of course, also gone further out with the rear. We've got the extra roughly 60 millimeters of increased width, as well as a correspondingly adapted track width. We're also working with carbon fiber components here, though in a different way than in the front, where we have an entirely new fender. Here at the back, we still have the fender from the base car's sheet parts. That means, in this case, a coach builder has to modify the sheet parts under these carbon components beforehand. The reason we do this is to ensure the correct wheel clearance, since the wheel is positioned further outwards. The side panels and the wheel arch's internal sheet are also modified accordingly. That's classic coach building, where we reshape the sheets, separate the sheets, and then reconnect them either by welding or riveting them. This entire lateral part is then repainted. In this case, since it's a special paint variant in signature gray, the entire vehicle is repainted. But other vehicles have only their lateral parts repainted, reaching all the way up to the roof. After the whole coach building process is finished, we attach these components here. So the fender attachment, a real carbon fiber part, the door attachment, as well as the attachment on the sill, so that it matches nicely with the attachment on the rear apron for a clean integration. That too, of course, has to be integrated in a visually convincing way. So that's why we have these complex components that are, of course, visually designed to make the entire concept feel even wider than it already is. Again, the rim is 1 inch bigger than the front axles, 22 inches, which is why it also has a different offset. As for the rather deep placement, something that's always important to us when designing is that when we work with mixed wheels, you should be able to easily tell the difference, especially in the rim surface. We always make sure to place the rear axle wheels as deep as possible so that we automatically differentiate it from the front wheels, where it simply isn't possible to have as much concavity, as much inward movement as on the rear axle. It creates a visual distinction which again makes it so beautiful and differentiated in its details. The fact that the rim really comes across as visually impressive with its deep placement on the rear axle, and that it has that corresponding difference in its design. Now we go from the rear axle to the back of the vehicle. An important and prominent component here at the back is the Rocket 1000's BRABUS rear wing. Basically, this component is also known from the Rocket 900, but it's been changed in many details. We've optimized the position of the wing on the vehicle. not just its height, but also its position from the back going outwards. We tested it in the wind tunnel and increased its potential from the ground up, so that with its new position, the fact that it's further back and considerably higher, with the front lip, plus the whole aerodynamic concept at the front, we've attained yet another significant performance advantage here. Another detail is the new end caps. They have a slit here, which is also new. It feeds in air from the outside in this lower area here around the wing. That way we get more favorable pressure conditions for the wing to work at 100% efficiency. A wing doesn't generate its downforce here on the upper surface, but always on the lower surface. That's also a reason why, for example, racing cars these days have these hanging wing designs, where the wing connection is up here. We didn't do that here because we have these supports milled from solid aluminum. That's another design element, and it's also just not relevant in this particular application. Also important at the back is a very large component whose production and manufacture are very time-consuming. The complete rear apron module with a rear diffuser made entirely of visual pre-preg carbon. It's a component which, because of all its curves, its finesse, its multi-part construction, is very time-consuming to produce. I've already spoken a few times about pre-preg carbon now, how we create the components and how we handle the center part issue. Especially here on the rear wing, you can see the center parting very well. Right here, you can see the part separated in the middle. You can very clearly recognize the mats that are molded exactly at this 45-degree angle and cooked in the autoclave accordingly. And I think you can also clearly see how sharp this edge actually is. You have to consider that these are two mats that are put into the machine as they are and then have to be installed here joint to joint without overlapping. They have to join in a way that's sharp and fine so that it looks clean. And doing this neatly really is a huge challenge, especially since you lay it out in the negative. So you don't even see the visible side at all, which means you're effectively working blindfolded when you put the components into the mold. Then they go into the autoclave, and you only actually get an idea of how good or bad it turned out when they come back out. It obviously becomes really clear once the parts are painted and obtain, as in this case here, a glossy finish. This is done in multiple layers in order to get this deep shine, this 3D effect, so that the carbon fibers can come across nicely. Only once it's ready can you actually tell whether it turned out well, very well, or just not any good at all. So that's always an enormous challenge. And it's the reason why every carbon component, no matter which, whether it's for a BRABUS Supercar or a BRABUS tuning program, goes through 100% of our quality control. That means every single component is looked at in detail as part of the quality control and examined for those details so that everything really is the way it should be. Here we have the integrated tailpipes. These are, again, new and significantly larger tailpipes. They have an outside diameter of 106 millimeters. They're made of titanium and carbon fiber. Especially this specific area here is carbon fiber. It's a painted part, carbon fiber, and then titanium. The mix of materials is obviously very special, very high grade. The central diffuser area here has a clean connection to the vehicle underbody, so that the air that comes up from underneath the vehicle and flows through the underbody can exit cleanly here. It also once again feeds this sub-pressure zone under the car in order to generate downforce in combination with the wing, as I just explained. Another special feature of the BRABUS Rocket 1000 is this cover here at the back. It gives us access to charge the battery. So we have a plug-in hybrid, and with the right charging equipment, we can charge up to 22 kilowatts. So, for example, if you only use this car for short distances in the inner city, if you have the appropriate charging technology, you can really drive it as a 100% electric car. The electric range from charging point to charging point is about 40 kilometers, so that's not bad at all. For inner city, urban use, it's absolutely sufficient. 1,000 horsepower, 1,820 newton meters of system torque. 0 to 100 in 2.6 seconds, 0 to 200 in under 10 seconds, and 0 to 300 in under 24 seconds. An electronically limited top speed of 316 kilometers per hour. All in all, incredibly impressive figures. The car is extremely powerful and extremely fast. It has a highly emotional V8 engine with, of course, and just down here is where you'll hear it, a sound to match. So now that we've talked about the drivetrain, the engine, and the exterior, we obviously still have to talk about the interior. Because here as well, we have a complete Brabus masterpiece configuration. That means the car has, you could say, been completely modified from top to bottom, from the headliner to the flooring by our team of Brabus interior specialists. We have a headliner made entirely of black Alcantara, followed up by a complete leather interior with lots of intricate details. For example, in this case, the contrast color piping, which in terms of workmanship are, given their small diameter, very finely crafted. We've got the typical details like the placed perforations with the shine-through backdrop, meaning it has a colored background. Then there's fabric that shows through the perforated surfaces, in this case in red, though our customers can of course choose whatever color combination they want. Another feature of the vehicle, we've also embossed our brand pattern, our typical inverted 77. For example, you can see it here in the seat side bolsters and along the seat's lateral surfaces. We did this for the first time in the various Super Black Masterpiece versions. The inverted 77 originally stems from 1977, the year Brabus was founded. By inverted, we mean one of the sevens is mirrored. And if you look at them both together, it has a connection to the Ruhr region because it has the shape of a winding tower. You can see that here very clearly when you look at it. I personally think it's always a really nice detail. The floor is also completely covered in leather with the same quilting pattern. We've got leather floor mats. So really, lots and lots of details. I already pointed out the piping, which you'll also find along the E-panel, on the central console, and on the seat. Also really important in a fully fitted masterpiece are the fully glazed metal and synthetic parts. For example, the sound system's grills, the various controls, buttons, switches, etc. In this case, they're all finished in the accent color we've dubbed Rocket Red. It's a really nice accent on top of the otherwise black interior. I have to say I like it a lot in this specific version because you can see a lot of these small details very well. For instance, these switches on the steering column lever. So there are countless details that come across very nicely thanks to the color accents. All in all, an incredibly elaborate interior with lots of visual details. Again and again, I catch myself sitting in a car like this one. And as I'm driving or just sitting in it, I'll discover yet another nice detail that just brings me pure joy. Plus, like I said, I especially think this red here makes for a really great combination. A topic we talk about time and again is what kind of leather we use. Here you can see very well in the door panels, for example, that for our masterpieces, and the customer ultimately always has an opportunity to change his or her mind, we always use a leather with very pronounced graining. This always differentiates the leather that's usually used across the auto industry from the leather we use. Thanks to this graininess, this surface granulation, you can see unequivocally that it's a different kind of leather, a very exclusive leather. Unfortunately, it's hard to make this really come across on camera. But there's a certain smell that's coming my way as I stand here. The smell of real, authentic leather that's just super high grade and, as such, gives off a great impression. Apart from the material qualities I've already mentioned, the Alcantara, the glazed surfaces, the carbon, and the leather, another detail is the seat system. We've installed performance seats in the vehicle here. These are very sporty seats that have tremendous lateral support. Also, since we have this integrated and indicated belt guide, which these real racing bucket seats typically have, visually it gives off a very intense and very sporty appearance. You can also see that here with the red glazed area. So I honestly think it's a great, really sporty seat that nevertheless has every possible comfort feature. Seat heating, climate control, fully electric adjustment, seat memory. There's nothing you need to sacrifice. And yet you still get this very sporty look. Plus, of course, also the seating comfort and the lateral support that usually only an extreme sport or racing seat offers. And with that, we've reached the end of our round tour through this vehicle, the BRABUS Rocket 1000. A car we're really proud of. We've reached 1,000 horsepower for the first time in the history of Brabus. And a number that, to me at least, is even more important and impressive is the system torque of 1,820 Newton meters, generated by the 4.5-liter V8 combustion engine, which we have modified extensively. It was really fun showing you guys this car. I'm incredibly proud to be able to show you this vehicle, and it's just an absolute joy. Thanks so much.
We put a lot of work into our videos, so please don't forget to like and subscribe and become a part of the Brabus community.